if you were allowed for some reason to run for a third term, is there a thought that the Democrats could try to run Barack Obama against you?
I'd love
For
that.
his third term?
Oh, I'd love that. That would be a good one. I'd like that.
Could President Trump actually run for a third term? He's actually entertaining discussion about it, but would that be a good thing or a bad thing? I'll give you my opinion in a little bit, and we'll also take a look at what is going on with President Trump running for a third term. Welcome back to the JP Reacts channel, my beautiful freedom-loving friend. We are here in America, as you can see. This is where we like to call out lies, hypocrisy, corruption, and highlight the amazing work of other freedom fighters because truth conquers. Now, I don't know that there's any bigger freedom fighter than President Trump. And as you probably know, if you're a little bit constitutional, that a president can only serve 2 terms or 10 years maximum in office if he was vice presidented in at some point. And then he ran for president, got elected, reelected. Awesome. However, there are major Trump supporters, people who are close to him, like Steve Bannon, talking about, very real talk about, like, not just we're looking into it, but we're gonna run for a third term. And President Trump, when reporters ask him about it, he's not shutting down discussions. He's not saying no. Sometimes he's a little bit tight-lipped. Other times he seems more open to the idea. As a Trump supporter, do you think it's a good thing or a bad thing of him running for a third term? We'll get to that, but first, let's take a look at some of the things directly from President Trump himself, starting with kind of joking about a third term, at least so it looks. This is a White House event, Black History Month, Tiger Woods in the corner. Here's President Trump.
Almost 40% of the vote. Now, I won't be happy the next time. Should I run again? You tell me. There's your controversy right there. There's your controversy. You'll be seeing that you're gonna see that tonight, Tim, on television.
As you could see there, President Trump, like he wasn't like fake laughing after he said, "You want to see me 4 more years?" And the crowd breaks out in a 4 more year chant. You see him like really laughing. I don't know if I've ever seen President Trump do a laugh like that. So that would suggest he played a joke. And ladies and gentlemen, just based on this clip alone, that's actually a joke. It's a contrasting reality. That's a comedic formula where you overlay something that would never happen into a reality. Therefore, what would never happen is happening in the reality that actually does happen. And then President Trump says more things. In this crappy, very fuzzy video, admittedly, President Trump is on Air Force One. A reporter's asking him about a third term. He says a little, says, "I don't want to talk about it," then keeps talking about it, says, "I don't want to talk about it," talks about it a little bit more.
You said you were not joking about a third term, about possibly wanting a third term. Does that mean you're not planning to leave office on January 20th?
I'm not looking at that, but I'll tell you, I have had more people ask me to have a third term, which is in a way a 4th term because the other election, the 2020 election was totally rigged.
Fair enough.
So it's actually sort of a 4th term in a certain way. I just don't want the credit.
I like President Trump. He could just deny, "I'm not running for a third term. I'm running for a 4th term."
For the second, because Biden was so bad, he did such a bad job.
Precedent limits a president to 2 terms. Is it your understanding that they have to
I don't
be?
even want to talk about it. I'm just telling you, I have had more people say, "Please run again." They said, "We have a long way to go before we even think about that." But I've had a lot of people. Yeah, go ahead. Did you have some?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, do you think that's an appropriate precedent to set, even if it wasn't you in this position, to see a president serve a 3rd term?
I don't want to talk about a 3rd term now because no matter how you look at it, we got a long time to go.
Now, if I was still on the side of, President Trump, he hasn't really said anything about it. Let's just say he's not looking at a 3rd term. Everything he just said is truly in line with President Trump's personality and methods of communicating. Like, he'll take support. Even if he's not going to do the thing, he'll take the support. So him kind of, in a way, bragging, rightfully so. I've had more people say I should run for a 3rd term. Even if he had no intentions of doing it, it is very in alignment with his character to share more people than anybody else want me to run for a third term. That makes sense. Take another quick look at the opening clip where Peter Ducey asked him about a third term. What if Barack Obama ran for a third term?
Story. I know it's hypothetical right now, but if you were allowed for some reason to run for a third term, is there a thought that the Democrats could try to run Barack Obama against you?
I'd love
For
that.
his third term?
Oh, I'd love that. That would be a good one. I'd like that. No, people are asking me to run, and there's a whole story about running for a third term. I don't know. I never looked into it. They do say there's a way you can do it, but I don't know about that.
That's interesting. He pulls that into the conversation now. They say there's a way you can do it. So he's definitely not shutting down the conversation. In my opinion, that's him opening the conversation a little more.
I have not looked into it. I want to do a fantastic job. We have 4 years, just about, almost close to 4 years. Time is flying, but it's still close to 4 years, and we're getting a lot of credit for having done a great job in the first almost 100 days.
So at least thus far, will President Trump run for a third term? We have not got a straight answer from President Trump himself. However, as of just recently, on President Trump's official merch site, which is trumpstore.com, he now has available Trump 2028 hats. I like it. Let's say he's not running for a third term. He is a businessman, right? For me, President Trump selling Trump 2028 hats by no means is like evidence of, oh, he's definitely going to do it. Nor do we have evidence of he's definitely not going to do it or try. I think just the contrary, like he's opening up and like entertaining, albeit in a very non-committal way, but he's really entertaining that conversation. Now, Steve Bannon, who is close to President Trump, seems to be the main guy public facing that's talking about President Trump. There is a way for him to run again as a third term. Sometimes he's even talking about more than just a third term. Important to know, this is not President Trump, it's Steve Bannon. I would imagine if President Trump didn't want him out there saying this, all he'd have to do is pick up the phone and say, Steve, can you please shut the hell up about this third term stuff? And out of his respect for President Trump, Steve Bannon would probably say, you betcha. So here's a short clip of Steve Bannon talking with communist Chris Cuomo about a third term.
Well, a man like this comes along once every century if we're lucky. We've got him now. He's on fire, and I'm a huge supporter. Want to see him again in 2028.
And obviously, anybody who doesn't like what you say but judges it as a function of a lack of intelligence doesn't know anything about you. I don't make that mistake. You're a smart guy. You know he's term limited. How do you think he gets another term?
We're working on it. I think we'll have a couple of alternatives. Let's say that. We'll see what the definition. We'll see what the definition of term limit is.
That sounds like lawyer talk. There's term limits. Yeah, what's the definition of term limits? It's interesting that the Constitution is very cut and dry, but where it gets so gray and ambiguous and probably gives rise to the lawyer industrial complex is the interpretation of the Constitution is very ambiguous. A nefarious interpretation of the Constitution makes it even more ambiguous. It'd be one thing if everybody had like an earnest, I'm setting aside my agenda, what does this say? It'd still be confusing, up for interpretation, but the spectrum would be narrower. But I think a lot of lawyers approach it with, what do I want the Constitution to say? And how can I be creative enough to interpret it that way? That makes the thing so murky. Let's go on, Steve Bannon. We'll get back to the video in just a second, but first, if feeling good energy, having good mental focus throughout the day, and getting the best night's sleep of your life is important to you, listen up. It hugely determines the quality of your life, your happiness, your mood, your energy, your metabolism. That's why an absolute staple of my nightly routine is using my Bond Charge blue light blocking glasses. What you do for a few hours before bed will positively, or most of the time, negatively impact your sleep, and you feel it the next day. And a lot of that has to do with the blue light that comes off your screens, your computer, your phone, your TV, your indoor lighting, because the blue light tells your body, hey, the sun's up, it's daytime, and you have cortisol awakening hormones flooding your system at night when those hormones should be going down and your sleep hormones going up. But the cool part about blue light blocking glasses, it takes you virtually no time to dramatically improve your night's sleep. You put them on a couple hours before bed and they block the blue light so that your body can settle into its natural preparatory sleep rhythm before you're even in bed. And I find an excellent companion is the Bond Charge Blackout Sleep Mask. I know when I have to sleep past the point of time when the sun's up or I'm able to take a nap to catch up on sleep, the Blackout Sleep Mask makes all the difference between me being able to catch the extra sleep or not. To get your Bond Charge blue light blocking glasses and blackout sleep mask, go to bondcharge.com/JPReacts, and for 15% off, use discount code JPReacts. And just know all Bond Charge products are HSA, FSA eligible, offering you up to a 40% tax-free savings. That's bondcharge.com/JPReacts. Now back to the video.
All right. Well, so you're talking about litigating this issue because I don't want people to listen to our interview and say Bannon's cooking up an insurrection. Bannon is cooking up. You know what I mean? I want people to get a straight take on where your head is. What are you suggesting?
Chris, as you know, I've had greater long shots than this. When we supported President Trump after the election, I realize you don't believe the election in 2020 was stolen. We do. We fervently believe that. When President Trump went back to Mar-a-Lago on January 20th, 2021, he was the longest of long shots to return to the White House. We said that day in our podcast and doubled down, having President Trump's back, that he was coming back not just to win the primary, he would win the White House, and we had to get organized and drive that victory and also start working on all the policies, what's called Project 2025 or the America First Policy Institute, but all those different think tanks that started putting in the policies that you're seeing today in what we call Flood the Zone or Days of Thunder or however you want to describe it. But this is many years in the making. So we've had greater long shots than Trump 2028, and we've got a lot of stuff we're working on there. We're not prepared to talk about it publicly, but in a couple of months, I think we will be.
What are the pathways as we know it of how President Trump can run for a third term? As you probably know, the Constitution says no president should serve more than 2 terms or 10 years maximum. If they were vice president, someone died or whatever, incapacitated. Biden should have, but he wasn't. But 10 years max or 2 terms. There is one pathway where the Constitution literally gets changed. Now, this isn't very likely because it takes like 2/3 of Congress and 2/3 of the states to vote to approve that. And Republicans don't control anywhere near 2/3 of all that. And even if they did, we got like the Mitch McConnells where I don't think getting 2/3 approval for a constitutional amendment is going to happen. However, the proposed change could be no president should serve more than 2 consecutive terms or 10 years. So President Trump has not served 2 consecutive terms. Probably would have, but we had some funny business in 2020. So that's one possibility. Another possibility of how we could get in office, J.D. Vance runs for president. President Trump is the vice president. J.D. Vance wins, takes office, and then resigns pretty quick. And then President Trump is the president. And based on the current Constitution, he could be president for another 2 years. I don't really envision that happening, though it's a theoretical possibility, because I think that would essentially be the end of J.D. Vance's political career. Nobody would reelect a guy who literally quit office, even though it might be to promote a guy in a very legal constitutional way that everybody loves more. And then if you're a liberal, you just imagine people like Putin or Hitler and he's a fascist. He takes office, never leaves. It's possible. I don't think that's very likely. And I'm sure there's many other scenarios that people like Steve Bannon and lawyers are looking into of how you can interpret the Constitution. You heard Steve Bannon say what's the definition of term limit? Let's talk about that. Okay. Now to the question, and I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. I'll share mine. As a Trump supporter, do you support President Trump running for a 3rd term? Now, here's my thoughts. And it is not an easy question to answer, at least for me. In short, no, I don't support that. I would love that, but I don't support it. Here's why I love that. Here's why I would like it. I believe Trump is a great leader. And I think our country, yes, he's saving it, yet 4 years of saving it, and then let's just say globalists take over right after that. I think what that really does is not save our country. I think it slows down the demise of our country by maybe 4 years. And maybe not even that. Maybe the globalists said, we had to take a 4-year hiatus while Trump was in office, screwing up our really important globalist plans. Let's accelerate it. So I would like to see President Trump be a leader. I think that would be so good for our country short term if he had another term, was democratically voted in for a third term. And then if he was democratically voted in, maybe even for a fourth term, I think that would be so good for America. However, here's why I inherently am a no on him running for a third term based on my common folk interpretation of the Constitution. And it's this. I'm standing on principle. It violates the Constitution and sets a terrible precedent. So yes, I agree with Trump. However, you got to be principled. I think that being principled is always best for us long term. In theory, it's great when the guy we love who's doing a great job, if he gets longer in office, in theory, that is great. But think about the precedents. Now a precedent is set. What happens if Hillary Clinton gets in office and stays in office for a second term and stays in office for a third term and stays in office for a fourth term because a precedent of more than 2 terms was set by President Trump? We might like it when it's our guy, and we might really suffer the consequences when it's not our guy because we didn't stay principled and we supported a non-principled thing. In my opinion, it's tough to stay principled when your agenda is being supported by abandoning your principles. I think that's what we're called to do. Like a principled liberal the past 4 years who, their history is free speech. A principled liberal for the past 4 years would have been saying, I don't like what the conservatives say. I don't like what they say about COVID, but they have every damn right to say it. No to censorship. That would have been a principled liberal. In my opinion, at least I, as a conservative, doing my best to be principled, I look at President Trump in a third term limit and say, I don't think that's a good idea. I'm not for it. Short term, I would love it. Then the other guys will not likely do it. They will certainly do it. That's my take. And that's a hard take to come up with because I love so many things President Trump does. I do believe he has America in our greatest interest. There could be a wild card where there's somehow, which I don't imagine, but it could be there, a very constitutionally aligned way in interpretation for him to run for a third term. Maybe it could happen. If that were to happen and it's principally aligned with the Constitution, cool. I'm all for it. But if that doesn't happen, I got to stay principled and say, no, third term, that actually violates my principles. Therefore, I don't like it, even though I like President Trump. So we will end our video with Shaney Rich getting a couple clips, man on the street interviews, him asking people, do you support President Trump running for a third term?
Do you think that Trump should run for a third term?
Definitely.
Why do you say that?
He's better than what we had, and I'm ready to see some changes, even if it's going to be ugly.
Hell yeah, I f with Trump. Trump a crazy motherfucker. He say what he want to say, he do what he want to do, and yeah, Trump got balls. I f with Trump.
Yes, definitely. I'm a Trump supporter.
Really? Why you say that?
Because, man, he honest, he does what he says, and he don't play around.
Honestly, I f with Trump. That's my nigga. He bringing that money back to America and keeping it in America. He do more what he want because he a businessman first, then politics next.
And you support that?
Yeah, I support that 1,000 because all of this is a business.
So there's certainly many Trump supporters out there who say, yes, I'd support a third term. And there's some out there that say, no, I don't think I support it. And let me know what you think. Not whether or not you support President Trump, but whether or not you would support the effort to embark on a third term for President Trump. I'd be very curious. Let me know in the comments below, and I'll look forward to seeing you on our next video. But until then, stay free.